I'm Matt at Nexus Baseball, and this is episode 4 of the Tommy John Epidemic. This series is a YouTube read of content from the book Plague of the Gods, an outsider's perspective on baseball's Tommy John epidemic, which is available now on Amazon. I decided to put this content on YouTube to make the material as accessible as possible. This series examines the science behind the most superhuman action the human body can produce, accelerating a baseball up to 100 miles per hour. The game itself changed along with this experimentation. Prior to the 1920 fatal beating of Ray Chapman, a single baseball was used for an entire game. The ball would quickly become soft and dirty, and pitchers were permitted to alter the ball with everything from saliva to emery boards. The ball was hard to see and moved erratically, with its pitcher-induced asymmetry. After Chapman was killed by a pitch that he didn't see coming, the Major League started to use multiple balls, replacing them when they became dirty to make them easier to see. Additionally, no manipulation of the baseball was allowed, forcing pitchers to use only their grips to make it harder to hit. This further put an emphasis on velocity, as much of the trickery was removed from the game. Pitchers had to rely on their grips to change the spin of the ball to have it break and change direction. This forced hitters to be more selective with their swings, watching how the baseball spun, as opposed to the ball's previous often erratic flight path. This made reducing reaction time even more pressing of an issue, as it lowered the time a hitter had to determine whether the pitch was indeed a strike. When somewhat of a consensus on the components of a successful pitching motion occurred 40 years later, almost 100 years into the game's history in the 1960s, batting averages dropped, and pitchers started to dominate. Velocity was clearly a component of this shift, so the major leagues lowered the mound height from 15 inches to 10 inches to attempt to preserve the balance between pitcher and hitter. This quest for velocity in pitching is still an integral component of the game today. Unless a prospective pitcher can throw at top percentile velocity, they are unlikely to even get a look from a professional scout. The philosophy being still that velocity equates to unteachable genetic talent, while the other tangibles of pitching are teachable. Throwing an object overhand is an entirely natural motion. Whether a caveman throwing rocks to hunt or a child throwing a snowball, the first instinct is to stretch the object back behind the shoulder and let it fly. Some children, however, have an instinctive ability to produce velocity without thinking about the process. Take, for example, a youth baseball team of 9 to 10-year-olds, the years where live pitching is generally first introduced to children. The coach, often one of the parents, tests each of the children's ability to throw strikes. In young children, this is primarily a factor of velocity, as a ball following a straighter path to a target is significantly easier to locate than attempting to lob the ball in a slower ballistic arc. These children are immediately utilized as the team's pitchers. Whether at age 9 or into the teenage years, the children that can throw the hardest are utilized as the pitchers. Currently, most teams of any competitive level utilize a radar gun on children as young as 8 to assist in this selection process and build a team during tryouts. The difficulty with this approach is that even at the major leagues, how a pitcher can build velocity is the subject of a great deal of controversy. For volunteer parents and gym teachers until high school at the earliest, it is simply not a consideration, as they lack the specialized knowledge to progress a young pitcher. It is the rare competitive Little League program that has staff on hand to help a child with pitching mechanics. Early instruction is primarily based on accuracy, the basics of gripping the baseball, and the role of the pitcher in the game. It is a process of natural selection whereby the pitchers with the best instinctive ability to develop pitch speed and velocity succeed and progress to higher levels. In this development context, it is easy to see why many still believe that pitching capability is an innate ability. By the time a child enters high school and is no longer eligible for Little League, the children with the ability to pitch have already been usually identified. Unless a child has already shown that innate ability for velocity, they are unlikely to make the cut to join a high school or travel ball team as a pitcher. In high school, pitchers are often provided with more specific information on the pitching motion, as coaches try to refine natural talent with instruction. This process is also one of mimicry, only slightly more formalized than the experimentation of early pitchers. Children are taught to experiment and mimic the motions, form, and balance of the professionals by adopting generally accepted principles. It should be noted, however, that these principles are mostly passed down tradition without any scientific basis. At the collegiate and professional levels, pitching instruction is a more refined version of the same. Professional pitching coaches are almost universally former pitchers, who after their careers decided to pass on their experience to the next generation. Lacking formalized scientific or kinesiology training, almost without exception, these individuals primarily draw upon their personal experiences and intuition. They're exceptional at coaching the strategy, execution, and nuance of the pitching game, but often lack a fundamental understanding of the biomechanics of pitching. The result is that until recently, most pitchers develop velocity through these critical development years naturally, as their bodies matured and through the process of training the art of pitching itself. The biggest change in velocity in pitching has come from the professionalization of athletic training at all levels of baseball. Gone are the boozy days of Babe Ruth, replaced by protein powder and strength and conditioning regimens. In recent years, pitchers, like all baseball players, have become increasingly better athletes. The benefits of conditioning with weights and resistance training have overcome traditional stigmas of development exclusively through work on the diamond. Resultingly, as pitcher athleticism has increased at all levels, so has the resulting velocity increased in lockstep. Scouts look for height and breadth, knowing that as their bodies develop in the weight room and their mass increases, so likely will the speed on their fastball. Comparisons between baseball's early years and modern times in terms of pitch velocity are challenging at best, without empirical evidence in the pre-radar gun era. It is a commonly held supposition, though, that average speeds on fastballs among professionals have increased significantly since the mid-80s. There were, however, statistical outliers, with giants of their eras, Bob Feller and Walter Johnson, both being thought to approach 100 miles per hour. In the last 10 years, average pitch velocities have been increasing steadily as training methods have changed, with today the league average fastball sitting at 92 miles per hour. In addition to enhanced conditioning regimens, this upward velocity trend is likely due to several other factors. First is the strategy of the modern era. Pitchers of prior eras were expected to pitch as deep into games as possible, with it being a badge of honor for the starting pitcher to complete the game that they started. To execute this strategy, pitchers would need to throw strikes and primarily pitch to contact, attempting to lure the batter to hit the ball but make less than ideal contact, resulting in a ground ball or a fly ball out. This would limit the number of pitches per batter significantly and worked well with the approach of most batters of the day, who attempted to avoid strikeouts by trying to put the ball in play and get a hit. While high velocity was preferable to induce a mishit ball, movement and change of speed were just as, if not more important. A comparison would be Mike Trout, the consensus best player in the game today, who hit 36 home runs and won the American League MVP in 2014 with 184 strikeouts. When Joe DiMaggio hit 46 home runs in 1937, he only struck out a meager 37 times, always attempting to put the ball in play. The focus today by comparison is on max effort and maximum velocity to induce strikeouts. The analytics teams rely so heavily on today show the value of preventing the ball from entering play. The strikeout and walk are seen as true outcomes. These are not subject to the uncertainty of the play of the defense or balls hit into areas that are not defendable, such as gap shots, balls off the wall, or home runs, the third true outcome. Velocity plays a tremendous role in the strategy, as strikeouts are a result of a swing and miss or a ball in the strike zone that the batter lacks the ability to identify. The faster the pitch, all factors isolated, the harder it is to hit as reaction time is reduced. In 2018, the average WOBA, weighted on base average, against fastballs less than 90 miles per hour was 370. By comparison, the WOBA against fastballs greater than 98 miles per hour was 270, a reduction of 37%. Additionally, a quicker fastball also increases the effectiveness of secondary pitches, such as breaking balls. The fraction of a second a batter has to identify an incoming pitch is reduced further, as they have to speed up their approach to catch up to the fastball, and are more easily fooled by a slower breaking ball that is diving away from their bat. Join me for episode 5 next week. Remember, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Your support makes this work possible. Also, if you want to jump ahead, please consider picking up the book on Amazon from the link in the description below. See you next week.